G'day viewers. In this episode we're going to tackle the last testable technical question mark surrounding the Bob Lazar story. We're going to investigate the 1 micron bandwidth statement reputedly asserted by Bob Lazar. However, we've not been able to find any direct evidence that Bob Lazar has ever made any so-called 1 micron bandwidth claim. The statement we're going to discuss is based upon the assertions of individuals you can find on the internet. There is no reason to suspect that these individuals have fabricated this piece of evidence. There doesn't appear to be any logical motivation for such a deed. However, for the sake of argument, we shall move forward on the assumption that the so-called 1 micron bandwidth statement originated from Bob Lazar. Lastly, I encourage all viewers to watch episode 50 and 51 on our Bob Lazar playlist if you have not already done so. Or if you have already watched them, but it was a while ago, you should consider watching these episodes again. Doing so will significantly assist your comprehension of the content in this video presentation. Okay, let's get into it.
Appearing on screen are two blocks of information, one from Set and Baal's website, the other from Paul Edwin Potter's page on the Ken Wright website. There are two key pieces of information contained on this slide. The first important piece of information is the Baal statement regarding carrier wave frequency being a 7.46 Hz signal at a 1 micron bandwidth. The second important piece of information comes from Potter, stating that millimetre waves pass through the hull. These are the so-called gravity A waves, which we have dealt with extensively in our Bob Lazar playlist. Our episode 65 summary of the gravity A wave is provided as an example. The problem we have is that Baal's 1 micron bandwidth claim appears to contradict Potter's millimetre wavelength claim, but we have rigorously scientifically verified Potter's claim across multiple episodes in our Bob Lazar playlist. However, Baal's statement is apparently a direct quotation from Bob Lazar. Potter also acknowledges the same quotation in his 2008 publication titled Gravitational Manipulation of Domed Craft. I have no reason to suspect that Baal and or Potter would fabricate this claim. They don't appear to have any motivation to do so, but I have not been able to find any direct evidence that Bob Lazar has actually asserted this claim. Perhaps he did, but I cannot find any evidence of it. But, for the sake of argument, we will proceed on the assumption that he has asserted this claim somewhere at some time. So, it seems that we're receiving mixed messages associated with this 1 micron bandwidth claim. Let's see if we can clear it up. The first thing we need to do is unpick the Baal statement regarding the carrier wave frequency being a 7.46 Hz signal at a 1 micron bandwidth. This statement, as written, is in itself a problem. It is confusing and needs to be correctly understood. Potter describes this statement as being equivalent to forcing a river to pass through a straw. So, Potter had a problem with it, and so do I. Firstly, Baal implies that the 7.46 Hz signal is the carrier wave, and the 1 micron bandwidth, which is actually a 300 terahertz signal, is the modulating wave. The problem with this is that it's a backward interpretation, as shown by the gravity as a wave illustration on screen. The carrier wave is actually the 300 terahertz signal because it is what's carrying the energy. The 7.46 Hz signal is carrying next to no energy by comparison, so bottom line, the asserted claim makes no sense. A better interpretation for understanding what's actually happening appears in the gravity as information illustration on the right hand side of the screen. As you can see, there are three kinds of digital modulation. Since the energy source is referring to the gravity A wave being generated by the element 115 primary fuel wedge, the frequency is utilised raw and unmodified. Hence, we may discard the frequency and phase shift keying options appearing in the illustration. Thus, the remaining form of digital modulation relevant to the sports model is amplitude shift keying, emphasised by the red box appearing on screen. Okay, so now everything appears to be hanging together a bit better, but we still have a problem. The problem is that a 300 terahertz gravity A wave signal is dead flat wrong. It isn't anywhere near this value. It is somewhere between 11.24 GHz and 11.39 GHz, as we established in episode 65. In fact, 300 terahertz is well outside the microwave frequency range, which was a fundamental requirement asserted by Bob Lazar, which we have discussed across several episodes in our Bob Lazar playlist. The fact that we cannot find any direct statement by Bob Lazar claiming a 1 micron bandwidth or 300 terahertz signal appears to imply that it was a mistake and has since been retracted. Anyway, let's run the numbers just to make sure. To begin with, we want to remind viewers that gravity is not a single wave phenomenon. It is a spectral phenomenon. We have mathematically demonstrated this in episode 50 and 51, so please take the time to review them if you have not already done so. Or even if you have and it was a while ago, please take the time to watch them again. However, as far as Bob Lazar is concerned, he asserted that the so-called gravity B wave is a singular phenomenon, so we must proceed from this perspective, despite the fact that he is mistaken on this point. On screen, you see content presented in episode 15. This shows how the so-called gravity B wave emanating from the Earth, as stated by Bob Lazar, exists as a spectrum of waves. As we add waves together, the value of the nth harmonic increases. This comes from a mathematical proof developed by Joseph Fourier over 200 years ago. So, this is standard science. This is not something that we have just invented for the sake of Bob Lazar. Anyway, as the table shows, greater than 99.9% of the gravitational effect at the surface of the Earth is contained within the first 415 harmonics. What is particularly astonishing, and what should grab your attention, is the correlation between our 7.43 Hz pulse frequency and Lazar's gravity B wave frequency. Our result shows that we have successfully derived the gravity B wave frequency claimed by Bob Lazar. In other words, we have validated the single most important scientific claim Bob Lazar has ever made. Let's take a step back and look at the significance of the 415th harmonic, that is, the Lazar harmonic. Why is this harmonic mode significant? Well, in the simplest language, it comes down to the principle of diminishing returns. We can see from the tabulated calculations that once we arrive at the Lazar harmonic, going significantly beyond it simply doesn't become a worthwhile investment. Moreover, let's not forget that the quantum vacuum harmonic cutoff mode is approximately 10 to the power of 28. So, even at the Lazar harmonic, we're actually only a tiny fraction along the path to its endpoint. Thus, the significance of the Lazar harmonic is that it's an effective threshold in terms of the return on energetic investment. Let's now consider the effect of the 1 micron bandwidth reported by Potter and Ball, because the effect it has on the power amplification factor is extremely significant. We can see that the 1 micron bandwidth solution requires the gravity A wave power to be amplified over 16 million times more than the optimal solution occurring at the Lazar harmonic limit of 415. To put things into the simplest possible terms, you'd have to be mentally impaired to reach for a solution which provides an anti-gravity improvement of less than 0.1% at such a heavy energetic price. I find it impossibly difficult to believe that the Martians could be so completely brain dead. Okay, let's now summarise what we've learned. Our analysis of the 1 micron bandwidth statement yields the following conclusions. Number 1. As reported and written by Ball and Potter, the statement makes little sense. In fact, Potter describes it as forcing a river to pass through a straw. Number 2. The gravity A wave frequency is implied to be 300 terahertz. This is well outside the microwave frequency range requirement implied by Bob Lazar in various interviews. Number 3. It appears to conflict with Potter's assertion of millimetre gravity A waves being produced by the gravity amplifiers. Number 4. It appears to conflict with our scientific derivation of gravity A wave frequency and wavelength. Notably, our derivation agrees with Potter's assertion. Number 5. Quite simply and plainly, the 1 micron bandwidth statement appears to be inaccurate. We stress that the contents of this episode are purely conjecture. The conclusions presented may be incorrect, so viewer discretion is advised.